Hello, lovely booktubers. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Reads Stuff. I'm Debs. I'm here in the book shack. It's not Sunday, it's Monday, but I'm going to do part two of my weekly reading wrap up. There's only 3 books in it, but it didn't seem sensible to stick them in with all the Garborga stuff that I was reading last week, particularly as it was an obscene week for my Garboard August reading. And these are anything but. These are lovely. These are what I was using last week as what I was calling palate cleansers. Some of the stuff that I read last week for Garborgas was so intense, I think the word could be, that I needed to read other things in between just to clear my mind of all the, well, let's face it was porn. Clear my mind of all the porn. So I did go on a bit of a book buying. Not much. I only bought a few books. But one of the books I bought at the beginning of last week was this. The Collected Poems of A.E. Houseman. And this includes all of his poetry, apparently. So to start with, we have A Shropshire Lad, which I think is what he's most famous for. Then we have his last poems, more poems, and additional poems. The additional poems being found by relatives in his papers after he died. I don't think I've ever read A. Houseman before, unless I read it at school and ignored it, because that's what you did with poetry when you were at school. A Shropshire Lad was beautiful, very maudlin though. And it was written. When was it written? I don't actually know. But the first poem is dated 1887, not dated as in that's when he wrote it, because he didn't, but dated as in the title of the poem. They are all about, there's a lot about death in there, and about going off to war and not knowing what you're heading into and not coming home. They're very poignant poems, and apparently they were much loved by a generation who then became war poets. I really enjoyed these. They were quite pastoral in places. Interestingly, I read that he hadn't been to Shropshire before he wrote A Shropshire Lad. Don't think it made a difference. Still very good. Second up, I didn't actually read this. I listened to it on Audible. Josephine Tay. I am continuing. I downloaded from Audible a book of all of the Inspector Grant series. This is the franchise affair, and this is book number 3. It's called the Inspector Grant series, and Inspector Grant is in them all. But it's not quite your classic crime-solving series. In the first book, which is called A Man in the Queue, Inspector Grant doesn't solve the crime at all. Someone else does. In this one, he takes a very backseat role. This is quite interesting. Robert Blair, who is a country lawyer in a small town, gets a call from a woman called Marion who lives in a place called the Franchise on the outskirts of their town. She lives there with her mother. They haven't lived there long. They were left it by an aging, well, dead uncle. She's got Scotland Yard and Inspector Grant in her house. A young girl, aged 16, who has been missing for several weeks, turned up at her parents' house and claimed two women, an older woman and a younger woman, had abducted her from a bus stop where she was waiting to catch a bus home, and they had forced her to live in their house as a servant, and they had beat her. And she had identified the house as the Franchise where Marion and Mrs. Sharp live. And she had identified the women as being the ones who kidnapped her. Marion phones Robert in absolute panic, saying, "Come and help me." And Robert says, "Well, I'm a country town lawyer. I write wills and things like that. I don't do criminal law." And she said, "I just need some support. Come out here and help me," which he does. He then gets embroiled into trying to prove that the two women had nothing to do with the crimes that, I can't remember her name, Betty Kane, that's it, that Betty has accused them of. But everything seems to back up the young girl's story, and she is extremely believable. So Robert decides that the only thing he can do is try and find out where she really was, because he believes Marion and her mother. And what he discovers is the basis of the book. I love Josephine Tay's writing. I really enjoyed that book. I quite like the fact that Inspector Grant doesn't necessarily take a starring role in the Inspector Grant books, which is a little unusual. I can't see Poirot putting up with that. Finally, this is one of the books that I was very excited about, and sent a photograph to Pat at Book Chat with Pat immediately, just to say, "Look what I got." Charles Wright, Caribou, former poet laureate of the United States. And this is a small collection of beautiful, beautiful poetry that explores nature and the truth of it and our place within nature. And the poetry is thought-provoking and gentle, and it's very eloquent. And I loved it. And it was all three of these were just the sorts of things that I needed to read to chase away some of the other stuff that I read last week. And if you want to know what the other stuff is, I put a video up yesterday. It's not for the faint-hearted. That's all I can say. I also very much love this cover. So that was my additional reading for this week. I didn't really think it fitted in with my trash content, and so hence the decision to do them separately. That's me done. Thank you for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done already. That would be lovely. Let me know what you've been reading. I hope you've been having lots of fun, and I hope this weather hasn't been too hot for you. Have a lovely week, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye for now.